Welcome back, guys, to Girls Unplugged. We are now at episode 3. Can't believe, whoa, lost my words. Can't believe we've actually made it here. To episode 3.
Not me laughing at you.
I know,
So
got to be done. I mean, I'm always stuttering over my own words, so better get used to it.
Same.
So, our first 2 episodes, you got to know us a little bit better, and we hope you feel a bit more comfortable in our presence. But today, we wanted to touch on something a little bit more serious. You would have heard us in the first couple of episodes talk about, we're going to do light-hearted stuff, we're going to talk about books, but we also want to talk about things that affect us in our daily lives. And today we're going to be talking about living with chronic illness. So many people out there are living with chronic illnesses that you don't know about, you don't see. And if you don't have chronic illness yourself, you probably know someone living with it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like all of us, even if we don't have it ourselves, either a friend or a family member, particularly like older relatives, you can definitely empathise at the very least.
100%. And I feel like we come from a community, in the book talk community, where actually I know so many more people living with chronic illnesses and have learned so much about it since joining this community.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit later because I feel like there's definitely a very specific reason why that is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much to say about it today, so we're excited to get into this one.
Yeah. So you may have picked up that in one of our first episodes, Bronte mentioned that she herself has a chronic illness. So I feel like she is one of the best people to explain how this affects, maybe not the best, let's see. We're judging her.
Yeah, I feel like this is an exam.
But I feel like Bronte is a perfect example of looking absolutely fine. You would never know if you didn't know that she suffers with a chronic illness. And I feel like there's a huge stigma around it in that sense that people just, because you look fine and you go about your daily life, they just assume everything is fine with you when in actuality it isn't.
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely what it is. And I feel like although I do look fine, if people were to know where I started with my chronic illness, they wouldn't believe the difference. So I'll give you a little bit of context, and I do feel like it's actually really important to tell people what conditions I have specifically, because one thing with chronic illness is actually awareness around the conditions. So for me, I have POTS and EDS, and that is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a mouthful. And then Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And within Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, there's, I think, 5 different subtypes, and I have type 3, which is hypermobility. Now, one thing that people don't realise often is that the word syndrome means umbrella. So essentially, if you have a syndrome, your condition is the top of the umbrella, but then it has all of these different conditions that kind of come with it underneath. So POTS might be my condition, and then under the umbrella could be things like migraines, anxiety, IBS. Yeah. And I think that's really important to note, because a lot of times people kind of look at people with chronic illnesses and they're kind of like, oh, there's no way you could have all of these different things. Oh, you're just a hypochondriac, or oh, you probably self-diagnose. But in actuality, what's probably happened is they have a syndrome with a lot of comorbid. Can never say that word.
Now who's stuttering?
Yeah. Comorbidities, which means conditions that are often associated with your condition. So POTS is a nervous system condition that affects your heart. Essentially, your body does not respond to gravity in the way a normal person's does. If I was to stand up, my heart rate would increase and my blood pressure would drop. That causes like palpitations, like dizziness, fatigue. I like to describe it as kind of feeling like a really, really, really bad panic attack. And coincidentally is often misdiagnosed as anxiety. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a collagen defect in the body. It's a disorder that affects your connective tissues. So what that means is your joints and your muscles don't function and repair like a normal person's does. So if you were doing exercise, your muscles would tear and then they'd heal and you'd add more muscle.
Yeah.
As just tears, and then that's it.
So how do you go about like staying physically healthy then? Because if they just tear, do they heal but it just takes a longer time?
It really depends on the severity of the condition. So a really good example for my bookish faves is Violet from Fourth Wing.
Mm-hmm.
Violet has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's confirmed because the author has it herself. So how Violet responds to physical activity is very much how it is in real life. You can't avoid physical activity, but you can, you should limit like physical combat type activity, so like boxing and things like that, you know, where you more risk of damage. You would supplement that with something maybe a little bit gentler like yoga. But it is really, really, really hard to actually have an exercise routine and to stay fit without causing further damage to yourself.
Yeah.
And that can be another thing that people don't understand, is like you're kind of seen as being lazy, but it's just not the case. You're actually just kind of in a sort of catch-22 of like, you need to stay fit and exercise to be healthy, but how do you do that if your illness prevents you doing that? So it's definitely a tricky one. Yeah, I mean, like for me, I tend to just try and do things that are gentle, like like I said, yoga, walks, things like that. But then again, POTS also is another one. If your body doesn't respond to gravity properly and doesn't like being stood up, the advice for POTS is to do exercise in the recumbent position, which is basically when you're sat down. So things like the rowing machine or
which I guess wouldn't be good for the Alessandros because that's pretty intense, a rowing machine.
Exactly. So it's really quite impossible. One of the best things for both of them is swimming, because you're removing that kind of pressure on the joints. So a lot of the treatment.
Good thing you're not a fake tan girly.
But I am a girlie who hates getting her hair wet. I hate it.
First world problems.
Yeah, so bad. But like for, I want to say 15 years of my life, I had to miss PE at school and go for weekly hydrotherapy and physiotherapy. And that was what I did instead of PE. But like, to look at me, you would never know that.
You would never know.
Absolutely not.
Like, I didn't know for the longest time after meeting you.
No.
Because it wasn't something you openly spoke about that, like, on social media.
Yeah.
Like, you do speak about it, but, like, then I don't remember you talking about it much. We had been friends for a long time before I knew the kind of severity of your health conditions. And I'm actually learning so much about it today, which is crazy because it's not something you do go into depth about that often.
No.
And do you feel like that's because you worry about what people are going to think when you're talking about it?
Yeah, I definitely worry that people will perceive it as attention seeking, or that they will think I'm just being, oh, woe is me, like blah, 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 I need sympathy. And obviously that's not always the case. A lot of the times when I do talk about it, it's in times like Disability Month, or there's a specific month for POTS itself. And I talk about them to gain awareness of them, just because for POTS specifically, it affects 80% of its patients are young women between the ages of 25 and 12. And so that is a formative time for most young women, and they are not getting the support that they need. A lot of doctors and medical professionals still don't know about the condition. It's incurable, so it's very important to at least raise awareness about it.
Yeah. So you've given us a bit of history about your condition. How do you deal with that now? Like, you've known about your conditions for quite some time. I don't know how old you were when you found out, but you've lived with them for a number of years now. Like, how do you deal with that and manage that in your day-to-day life as a nearly 30-year-old woman?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with EDS at 10, and then after many years of investigation, I was diagnosed with POTS at 21. So I've had quite some time to find what works for me. If I need to take a rest, I'll take a rest. I don't care if people perceive that as lazy or whatever, I'll do it. And I'll also do whatever treatments work for me, no matter what people think of them. So for example, people have strong opinions on pharmaceuticals and medication.
Yeah.
And I do get why, because it's not something that should be made as a decision lightly. There are obviously side effects to most medications, but for me, I'm going to do what I think is best and what feels right in my body. And that also translates to like day-to-day things, just knowing my limits and knowing when to push myself and when to actually do things that will be hard but worth it, and when to actually just say, no, I'm not going to do that today. And sometimes that might be cancelling plans. Sometimes that might be just limiting the things on my to-do list. Sometimes that might be actually saying, no, you should go for a walk and do exercise today. And a lot of it is to do with diet as well. Like, unfortunately, the healthier I eat, the better I feel. So, you know, it's just about
less cookies.
Yeah. On the day-to-day, I just really have to weigh up a lot of decisions. It's a lot of mental maths all the time. Symptoms-wise, there's a lot of things that still impact me today that a lot of people probably don't realise. The biggest one is migraines. I'm constantly getting migraines. I think there's a few reasons for that, but they'll just like probably never go away, so I just have to manage them. The IBS parts of my conditions, if I don't eat right, I'm going to be in a flare-up. Fatigue is one of the biggest ones, and I think that goes for most people with chronic illness. Fatigue is a pretty common symptom across a lot of illnesses. But I feel like I have just learned to push through it, which is probably not a good thing, because every so often I'll probably like have a flare up or burn out as a result.
Yeah.
But there is also the balance of having to do what your life requires.
Yeah.
The world doesn't stop just because you feel a bit tired, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. And there's definitely stuff that impacts me every day, but if I think about where I was 10 years ago, it's light years different. You know, I couldn't work more than 20 hours a week. I was in doctor's appointments, hospital appointments every week. I was so thin. I was literally a size 4. I was like 6.5 stone, and I'm 5'5", so I was very underweight.
And why were you so underweight?
Because, well, for a few reasons. One is because I wasn't on medication for my heart, so my heart was going so fast, it was like I was constantly in overdrive, in adrenaline. If you think about when you're about to do something scary, like go on a roller coaster, and your heart's like, that's what mine was like all day, every day. So it was like my body just never had rest. So that made me thin. And then also the implications with digestion around my illness. I was constantly being sick. I couldn't keep much food down, and they couldn't find me a medication that worked because I was allergic to the sickness medications. So it was just like very complex. And yeah, so like when I compare that to now, that's also something I have to think about on a daily basis. Is I'm not there anymore, but I could be if I don't look after myself.
Yeah.
I could go back to a situation that's not good. And also, like, how do I implement the steps that stopped that initial situation on a daily basis?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at now as a nearly 30-year-old after dealing with it for, you know, all of my life.
And you mentioned that you do what you feel like you need to do. When it comes to having to like cancel plans, or people are trying to make plans and you're not really sure what you want to do, do you ever feel guilt?
100%, all the time. This really does come down to the types of friends and people you have in your life.
You've got a great one.
No comment, I'm just kidding. But no, but it's true, isn't it? Like, and I want to say that I'm not the only chronically ill person in our friendship group. There are several, and several who are worse, way worse than me, and have to constantly cancel plans or not be able to attend them in the first place.
Yeah.
And I feel like our friendship group is pretty understanding of that. I can't speak for anyone else, but it really does depend on who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you don't have the right people around you, it does take a lot of education and a lot of explaining things. And 9 times out of 10, when you explain something, people tend to be like, right, okay, now I understand. But it takes time to get there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you have chronic illness, the last thing you want to do is keep explaining it and trying to get people to understand, because that takes mental energy in itself. So I do feel guilty when I have to cancel plans, but I would say 90% of the time I have absolutely nothing to worry about, and people make me feel like I have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
And I am lucky where I'm at the position where I don't have to do it often.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have something exciting coming up, I can plan ahead and sort of think, right, how do I make sure I'm well enough for this?
You make sure that all those things you should be doing, like your diet and at least having some vague mood, like all those things, you make sure that you are on it so that you are prepared for.
Yeah. Even just to the point where, like, if we're going for a day out in London, I'm wearing trainers because I know my joints and my knee are going to be killing if I'm wearing Doc Martens.
Yeah.
If I'm walking 20,000 steps around London, it's not going to be good unless I'm wearing...
Easily done on a bookish day out in London.
Yeah,
so
literally.
Easily.
So it's not going to be good unless I'm wearing like Adidas or New Balance, which unfortunately are not the most fashionable, nice things to wear if you're going for a nice meal. But it's a toss up.
You know me, trainers go with everything in my opinion.
It's true. We're in a very good like trend era where activewear is in as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Which
or just even like nice outfits with like dad trainers. It's the vibe.
Yeah. Thank God New Balance are in fashion because those are the ones that are the comfiest.
Yeah, they fucking 100% are. I love my New Balances. Can't believe I only just found them before Christmas.
Yeah, I know. I've got 3 pairs and I need more.
Love it.
But yeah, to answer the question, you can't help but feel guilty sometimes, but if you've got the right people around you, then they should help with that.
Yeah, because I it's so funny, maybe it's just me and the way that I am. I think it's so funny when you and others in the group, and we won't name names because we don't know how open they would want to be about it, but sometimes when some of the girls come on and I'm like, so sorry, just want you to know I have been reading the messages, just haven't had the energy to message back, I've been having a flare up. And I think, oh my God, I can't believe you're apologising to us. Like, you're feeling shitty. You absolutely do not need to apologise to us. Like, do you need anything? Like, love you.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy that you guys feel like sometimes you have to justify that. And I get it in the sense that when I get wrapped up in like mum stuff and there's 200-300 messages and I'm like, I'm so fucking sorry. Like, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm ignoring. And I know deep down I don't need to apologise for it. But I guess it's just a natural reaction for anyone, maybe.
I think it's a very British cultural thing as well of constantly apologising and also like needing to have the stiff upper lip and like always be okay.
Yeah.
I'm very guilty of that. Like, I will constantly just like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Let's just crack on. And then like I lie down in bed at night and my like fucking shoulders like on fire. Do you know what I mean? Because I've like done too much. I mean, there's just different approaches for different people, and that's just what works for me.
So you've spoken to us a bit about like what the things that you do to help yourself. Do you have advice for other people either going through the diagnosis process or having just recently been diagnosed that maybe might not have found their feet yet?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is there's a really great website called Stuff That Works, and I think it's still kind of in its early phases, but it's basically like an online community, and there's a separate community for all the illnesses.
Okay.
So like you fill in a survey and then it will add you to your specific group. So like I'm in a POTS group, I'm in an EDS group, and I'm in a migraines group.
Okay.
And in that group, people from all over the world can put what treatments they've tried, what symptoms they've got, how like what's helped them, what problems they're having. So it's people going through very specific situations like you.
So is that just for chronic illnesses, or could that be for anything?
Mental illness is on there as well. I don't actually know like the full
scope.
Yeah, I don't know the full scope because when I joined it, it was in its alpha phase of getting testing, and that was a good few years ago now.
And how did you find out about that?
I think I saw one of the Instagram pages I follow post it, and that's another tip actually. One thing that I definitely recommend is seeing if your specific illness has a charity or an organisation behind it.
Yeah.
So, for example, POTS has potsuk.org. On that website, I honestly don't think I would have survived without that website because it has lists of each specialist doctor in the country, has resources for how to help specific symptoms. It has like everything you could think of. It's like a full resource, and actually one of the people that wrote it was the cardiologist I ended up seeing.
Wow.
So it's really useful as a
Never
tool.
would think to do something like that.
Exactly. So if you can find it, it's also not just useful post-diagnosis, but it's really useful to get a diagnosis, because if you do have a condition that's less researched or less well known, these can be really useful medical tools to take to like your GP.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But another thing is look if there is a specific American version of that on Instagram. And the reason I say American is obviously because their healthcare is private, they are worlds ahead of us in research.
Yeah.
The Mayo Clinic in America has so much research into POTS and EDS that is like 10 years ahead of us. So 3 years ago, they posted like they were doing a study on the link between autism and POTS, and I've still heard nothing about that in the UK. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, you can find so many new things to try, or you can make connections that you didn't have before. People will post in the comments of these posts like their experience. Like I remember seeing one woman ask a question in the comments about what pregnancy is like without conditions, and people could answer it. You just wouldn't get that if you were just alone in the UK.
Yeah.
So I think finding charities and like American research sources on social media is really helpful. The biggest, most helpful tip, which is also coincidentally the hardest, is finding a doctor that you really, really like and trust.
I feel like that's hard in general in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it took me 5 hospitals, I want to say 4 or 5 different GP surgeries. And then on a whim, one day while I was at uni, I had this locum GP, I only ever saw him 3 times, who literally read through years of notes on my GP file and just went, oh, you've got POTS, which top cardiologists hadn't done. They'd been saying, no, you haven't got POTS, no, you haven't got POTS. He was like, you've got POTS, like it was the simplest thing in the world. And he was like, we can do the test for it right here. So he did a quick test. He was like, yeah, you've got it. I'm referring you to this specific cardiologist. And that was how quick it was to change my life.
Crazy.
I know. And it just took one person who listened to me, took the time to understand what I was saying, and was young and new enough that he was up to date with like newer conditions almost.
Yeah.
So if you can find that doctor,
and also just cared enough to actually read your history.
yeah,
Like so many times I go into a doctor, going off track a little bit, but I will go into a doctor and I will have called for something specific. They would have asked me why I'm coming in, and I'll sit down and they'll say, okay, what can I do to help you? What's going on? And I'm like, you don't like why don't you know what's going on?
yeah,
Why don't you know what's going on? I'm coming in for something very specific
yeah,
and you're just clueless.
yeah. Or like they'll just minimise it as well.
Yeah.
So I could go in. I remember when I first moved to London, my joints were playing up again. So I went to a GP and I was like, my ankles are really hurting. Like I've had orthotics in the past. And he was like, you can just get some £5 insoles from Amazon. Here, I'll show you them. And I remember just like thinking, do you not think if that was what I needed, I would have already done it? I have very specific, complex needs. I've had orthotic insoles from the NHS before. Like, obviously, cheap, shitty little ones from Amazon aren't going to do the job.
They're not going to do the same thing.
It's just, yeah, and I get it because they're under so much pressure. And I feel like for every bad doctor, there are so many great ones, but it is incredibly frustrating in this country trying to get the medical attention you need. So if you can switch GPs, if you can, you know, ask for a specific referral. I mean, that's another thing I did. I found the doctor on the POTS website that I wanted to see. It just so happened he was in London, but it wasn't a hospital that's in my catchment area. And I said, I want to be referred to see this person. And so they did. So that's another thing to try. But aside from that, CBT. I feel like getting the mental health support you need before you get to a point you're really bad or you're really isolated and struggling is so crucial.
Yeah.
I feel like people underestimate just how much CBT can help with physical health.
100%. I think people underestimate CBT massively anyway. I feel like people go into it thinking they're not going to be able to change my mindset. Like, what is this going to do for me? And that is exactly the wrong mindset to go into CBT with, because I've been there, I've been CBT, and I understand how you can think, well, what is this going to do for me? But if you go into it open and honest about your thought processes, the things that are wrong with you, and you get a good therapist, and to be honest with you, I haven't come across many bad therapists, to be honest with you, and the techniques are the techniques for a reason, you know.
Yeah. And if CBT doesn't work, there's also just more like talking therapies. I've done both. I find both helpful for different reasons, but specifically for physical health, CBT and shutting down those like catastrophizing thoughts or trying to train your brain to look at some of the positives and just dealing with pain management as well as a whole can be so useful. And 100% like try and get a good therapist. I'm super lucky also, like even in the NHS, all of my therapists have been all right.
Yeah.
One specific one was amazing. But you can, you know, self-refer to your local service in your area, or you can do private as well. There's definitely
That's what
options.
Yeah, I've been private both times I've had therapy.
I've done 3 times NHS and once private, and again NHS was always CBT, private was talking therapies. So just dependent on what works for the person, but definitely try at least some form of mental health support.
Yeah.
And then to kind of boost your own mental health, having a hobby. This is harder than it sounds, because obviously if you're feeling unwell, the last thing you want to do is push yourself into doing
something new.
Yeah, but there are so many things that I've learned I can do from my bed. Like even when I was at my most poorly while I was at university, I used to sit in my bed and watch beauty YouTubers, and then I'd sit with my makeup around me in my bed and like replicate it. After I kind of fell out of my love for makeup, I ended up drawing. That's another one. Obviously, again, like if you've got joint problems in your wrists, that might be a hard one. But books is one that I feel works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because you can have your Kindle set up, you don't necessarily need to hold it. You can get comfy in any position that works for you. And I do think that is why potentially so many people in Book Talk have chronic illness.
Yeah, because it's definitely a reoccurring theme in the Book Talk community. I feel like there are a lot of people that suffer with different health conditions that, you know, might affect them minimally, might affect them hugely every single day. But you are right. I think reading is in the main accessible to most people. And people that say they're not into reading, I genuinely believe, hand on heart, that there is a genre for everyone.
100%. And if it's not the genre, the format.
Yeah.
Because even if you're dyslexic, audio.
Audiobooks.
Yeah, I honestly believe that if you haven't found a book you like, you just haven't found the right one.
Yeah, the right format, the right genre. And for dyslexic people as well. This is something I actually only learnt recently because my husband is quite severely dyslexic. Kindles actually have a specific dyslexic font. And obviously on Kindles you can make the font bigger as well. So for people that are dyslexic, it makes it a lot easier for them.
Yeah, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah,
that's
Kyle's
really
found it so much. I mean, he's been reading for a while now. He never used to. And that's why I said there is a genre for everyone. And I feel like once you find the genre for you and you get into reading in general, you can go out there a little bit. But you know, he can read for much longer periods of time. Moving to the dyslexic font, previously he used to get tired so much quicker and just fall asleep reading, I think, because it was just such hard work for him.
Takes so much concentration.
Exactly. But since he's moved to the dyslexic font, he's bloody up reading Zodiac Academy till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Love it. Love it. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's another thing as well. Like once you've get into reading, you can find books with specific chronic illness rep.
Yeah.
So like I love that. That is one of the main things I look for in a book, is like some sort of diverse representation, because I know the impact it does have when you connect. So like, for instance, 7 Days in June. Have you read that one?
Yeah.
She has migraines, but it's like debilitating.
Yeah.
It affects her whole life, and I thought that was done really well.
Yeah. That was done so well.
Yeah. Obviously, we talked about Fourth Wing as well. There's just loads, particularly YA. There's quite a lot of YA books with really great chronic illness rep. So even just in the sense that you can connect to the character, it makes you feel less alone.
100%. Whenever I read a book and the female main character has ADHD, I remember the first time reading a book where she clearly had ADHD, and I was like, I feel so seen right now. And that was before I was even formally diagnosed. I remember reading and thinking, this sounds just like me.
Yeah.
And it was at the time that I was like, oh, I feel like I might have ADHD.
Yeah. Was that The Chase by
It
Elle
was,
Kennedy?
yeah. It was that was the first book I read with any ADHD rep in it.
Yeah, she does that really well. And Done and Dusted is ADHD. And then This Vicious Grace as well. Yeah, they're all ADHD ones. But yeah, 100%. Like, it's just almost like a weight off your chest to be like, oh, okay, it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, other people feel like this.
Yeah.
Other people deal with this. So I just feel like reading is such a good one for that. I mean, as well, like, one of the things that can impact you that we haven't talked about with disability is finances. Because if you're not able to work full time, if your illness is that bad, then obviously you don't have much money. But you've got libraries. It's even accessible from that aspect. So 10 out of 10 recommend reading, even though I'm biased.
Very biased, but it is a great hobby for like people that can't find a really heavily physical hobby.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to play a game now.
Yeah.
2 truths and a lie
about
chronic illness.
Okay, I feel like I need to get them up on my phone.
Yeah. Hit us with what you got.
Okay, so I once shit myself in public because my IBS was so bad. Okay, number 2. I got told I was just an anxious woman and that all women are anxious. Number 3. One medication caused hallucinations that were so bad I thought there was a giant spider next to me when I was shopping.
Stop. The shitting yourself one, that's the lie.
Yeah. Now don't get me wrong, there's been a few close calls, but I've not managed to actually shit myself yet. Thank God.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh God.
But yeah,
Hang
I
on a
did
minute.
hallucinate that Aragog was next to me in Boots.
Stop it, that's so fucking funny.
It was terrifying. I still get weird, like the medication I'm on now, I don't get hallucinations, but I get light flashes. So I'll think like, oh, something's just moved next to me, and I'm like, nope, nothing there. But yeah.
Oh my God, that would creep me out.
It's just annoying now, but yeah. And then I got told I was an anxious woman and all women are anxious. That actually, I was in the back of an ambulance and I was in the middle of a cardiac episode, and the paramedic was like, you're just anxious, calm down. And then my housemate, she was like, she's not anxious, she's got a heart condition. And he was like, she's just anxious, all women are anxious. And she was fuming. She was proper fuming.
My God.
Yeah.
So I don't have a chronic illness.
Yeah.
I don't actually, it's not classed as a chronic illness, but I do have endometriosis, and I feel like that's probably the closest thing for me. And it does affect my life regularly, and for some people who have it really severely, it does affect them every single day. So
yeah,
it's as close as I can get to understanding what you're going through.
It can be really debilitating.
Debilitating, it can be. So my 2 truths and a lie. It took me 10 years to get diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
I once used endometriosis pain as a reason to get out going to a funeral.
Okay.
And when I was 11 years old,
Mm.
the pain was so bad they had to take me into hospital and give me pain relief injection in my butt.
Oh not the bum. Stop it. Okay. I think knowing what I know about you, that the diagnosis one is probably the lie. 10 years. Is that a lie?
I accidentally gave you 2 lies.
Okay, Tor doesn't know how to play this game. She's just given us 2 lies.
That was one of the lies though. It actually took 16 years for me to get diagnosed with having endometriosis. I started my periods when I was 10.
Yeah.
And I didn't get diagnosed until I was 26.
It's just mental. I mean, I would say it surprises me, but at this point it doesn't, because we know women's health is severely under-researched, very rarely believed, and just fobbed off.
Yep.
So unfortunately that doesn't surprise me, but it's still horrendous.
It's bad.
Mm.
Just to be clear, I never used endometriosis to get out of going to a funeral.
She gave us 2 lies.
So I did actually get pain relief in my butt as an 11-year-old girl.
Was that embarrassing?
I didn't care. I was in agony.
Yeah, just happy to get it sorted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the joys of being... Do you know what's my favourite... Yeah, I was going to say, but do you know what's my favourite saying about chronic illness? And it kind of relates to that.
What?
My illness is chronic, but my ass is iconic. And that was you while you were getting injected in the arse.
I love it.
And you can swap... If you haven't got a bum, don't worry, you can swap it for tits.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
You're going to start saying that now.
But all jokes and humour aside, I feel like this was actually a really eye-opening podcast even for me.
Yeah.
And I hope that anyone listening to this out there struggling or is, you know, thinks that there's something seriously wrong, that is trying to get diagnosed, you know, takes this as a bit of inspiration and finds something useful from it.
Yeah.
Do you have any last words of wisdom?
It sounds cringy, and it is a bit cringe, but I just think people who are in the worst or the thick of their illness should know that it can and it does get better.
Yeah.
Like, if I think about where I was 10 years ago, you honestly wouldn't believe the difference. I never thought I would be able to work. I never thought I'd be able to do anything. I even had a doctor who told me, you should be happy you can even work part-time. And now I'm able to live like a 90% normal life.
Yeah.
So if you are really struggling and you feel like nothing's working, please just keep hanging in there, because it can and it does get better. And find yourself some great friends who cheer you up when you're feeling down.
You know, you've always got me to say something really fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you're feeling shit. I'm not really like I mean, people can cry on my shoulder, I'm very understanding, but I'll always make a joke out of a really bad situation.
I feel like neither of us are particularly like lovey-dovey. We're just like, let's have a laugh.
Yeah.
And that
So
works
true.
for us. But if you need lovey-dovey, then find yourself a friend that's going to give you a big hug.
Or some online communities, like we said, that website. Remind us what the website was.
Stuff that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. And feel free to DM us. You know, you can find us in all the places. Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Feel free to just slide into our DMs if you need advice, someone to talk to.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Don't leave me alone in this. Me out here putting my illness into the world.
And we will definitely be doing more serious episodes like this. Like, we definitely think we're definitely going to be doing one on mental health conditions, neurodiversity. We've got lots of things like that planned. If there's anything else specific you'd like to hear us talk about, please drop us a comment.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like our podcast, follow us on all of our channels, and we can't wait to see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.